Welcome back to Staunton Country Park for the final race of this View From National Cross Country Championships. The men's senior race will be going off in just a few minutes. Some last minute preparations, last visits to the loos, making sure the laces are tied up. The atmosphere really building up, and Anne Howard has been chatting to a couple of people who can give us a taste of what it's all about.
What's so great about an event like today, do you think?
I think Anne Howard is probably the best cross-country race in the world. Not the highest standard, but the senior men's English National will feature something like 2,000 competitors lining up, and it really is quite a stupendous sight. And the sound of those guys hitting the grass, hitting the floor with the spikes as they sort of sprint along is quite incredible. And what's amazing is for those people who run at all levels, is the people running, say, maybe place 1,000, and their teammates will be screaming them on. The sense of camaraderie and team spirit about this cross-country race is quite special in the world.
Who would you tip to win today's race?
Well, for the senior men, I think you've got to look at another past champion, Spencer Duval or Barry Royden.
I think the senior men's is wide open. I think perhaps Dominic Bannister, John Downs if he runs, Spencer Duval, maybe Adrian Passy.
Well, some 1,600 men lining up with realistic hopes of taking the medals, perhaps only 10 or 20, 8.5 miles ahead of these men. 2 large laps of this very tough course. First half mile or so, always very, very vicious in the National Cross Country Championships. The leaders just trying to settle into a rhythm here. To the right there, wearing 591, Spencer Duval of the Cannock and Stafford Club. But there goes Rob Denmark in that yellow Basildon vest, the Commonwealth 5,000 champion. Real mix of athletes of different abilities in that leading group, and it's yet to sort itself out. The early stages of what is a long, long race. Probably the toughest race as regards distance in the world, Steve. The World Championship's only 7.5 miles.
Well, it takes a special man to go out over 9 miles and run at the sort of pace over these sort of terrains. And Spencer Duval has done it before, former winner of course, and trying to do it again here. Chose not to run in the World Cross Country Trial and saved himself for the National.
These are the guys I admire the most, I guess, Steve, the guys who aren't running for glory, just running because they love the sport, and that in itself is enough. These guys, well, they've all got a taste of something slightly more from the sport, if you like. Many of these leading guys, Stephen White here on the left, looking very strong indeed, is an international class track runner, is running the low 340s for 1,500 metres. Spencer to the right there, a World Championship representative in the steeplechase, and Steve Brooks from the Bingley Club in that blue and white hooped vest also has some great victories behind him, including the junior title back in '89.
Well, this group beginning to move away. Also Paul Green of Sale Harriers. There's Barry Royden there. And Barry, of course, had a bit of a fall last week, tripping up Rob Denmark, who we've just seen going through, and Rob was none too pleased with that, and he may not like the conditions that he has in front of him here. Of course, the track runners didn't always like the cross-country conditions, but you still had to go out and do it. was all part and parcel of preparing for the summer. And as I said, Stephen White and Spencer Duval, both men who have great prowess on the track, but know how vital it is for them to come out in the cross-country season and to run well. The confidence it gives you from having performed well in races like this. It didn't really matter if the track was your main target, how high you finished, but if you did have a good run, if you did have a good winter behind you, got some good results, then it really did give you a lot of confidence going into the summer season.
Well, just as was the case with Lucy Elliott, I think a lot of people are questioning why Stephen White is running this one. He was 7th in the trial last week. He is going to the World Championships. Indeed, the only man from that team selected for the Worlds who was running this particular race. Duval, as I said, coming back from injury, still short of racing. Disregarding this as really one more step on the ladder back up to full fitness. But these four have really gone away. Barry Royden there, second from left there in the white vest, looking very strong, as he says, Steve, hungry after that fall last week, and the gap's beginning to develop. The pace certainly through this first lap will be very, very fast indeed until they begin to settle down and they've sorted themselves out a little bit. But White looks to be calling the shots. I know Spencer is very confident. He regards the country as his property, really. It's where he is the specialist. But Stephen White looks so strong in the red.
Barry Royden on the far side there, nearest the spectators, the long-time leader in the World Cross Country Trials last week, deciding to sit in with this early pace being set by Stephen White and Spencer Duval. Rob Denmark was back in 6th place and setting his stall out early to get up in the top 10, which would certainly be a good run for him in these conditions.
Really clicking along on this difficult course. These men not exactly hanging about either in the middle of the pack. You can see in the distance there the field streaming over the countryside like a river, really. But here it's decidedly thin on the ground, but very, very high quality. Duval up against Stephen White. These two certainly having a little mental battle here, perhaps trying to dominate the other. Barry Royden back in 4th place, trying to go with it. Steve Brooks for that Bingley club also gliding over these undulations with the other two. But what's interesting, Steve, is that Stephen White, despite displaying this strength over the English national cross-country distance, wants to stay at 1,500 metres, doesn't he? Wants to remain as a middle-distance runner, and I think that's good at his stage.
It's very good if he can carry this sort of strength, and as you said, 1,500-metre runners do have to put mileage in and do have to work hard and run hard in these conditions if they can, and you're going to have the mud, you're going to have the water.
And rocks.
Well, that's what cross-country is all about. Brooks coming through there with Royden, trying to avoid all the obstacles. At least there's no fences or logs in this one. Rob Denmark manoeuvring himself through there quite nicely. Still very well placed indeed. Paul Green of Sale there beginning to move backwards after that very quick start, but the athletes starting to stream through, and these are very, very high-class men.
Well, these two, neither of them prepared to give in, are they? Look, this little argument almost is pulling them clear of the men behind them, and it's an awkward situation, I suppose, for the pair of them, because probably each of them going slightly faster here than they would like, almost clashing elbows there.
She's doing a great job, you know. I wonder how many times she's going to say mind the rock this afternoon. There's a lot of men here to be warned.
What, 1,600?
At least she's got a good loud voice, and let's hope that nobody trips over it. Nobody has so far. She's doing a great job.
What these two really need to do now is settle down, work together, I reckon, and really discuss who's going to cross the line first in the last couple of miles. That's what I'd do, I think, if I was in this situation, Steve. Help each other now to pull clear, then you're guaranteed a place in the first two. Still on the first lap, though, and well, I'm a little surprised at how quickly they pulled away from the rest. We know Stephen White is in very good shape. Spencer is a man who's only come back about 10 weeks ago from some very bad knee injuries, and is still on the way back up to full fitness. Uses altitude training a lot, and maybe that's the key to his great running.
Well, these two really have put some daylight between themselves and the others, and as you said, almost working together at this point, but I'm sure that just testing each other out, just feeling whether the one is going to show some weakness or not, and maybe thinking through their minds at which point maybe they're going to put the foot on the gas. Will they wait for a particularly muddy patch, or wait for a better piece of running and see if the other guy is feeling a little bit tired already? Stephen White, I've been very impressed with the way he's running here. A lot of authority, and just ploughing through the mud. You can see that here, looks very, very strong indeed. Spencer Duval, as you said, getting back to a really tip-top shape, pushing Stephen White all the way here. Good battle between these two men.
And Spencer, of course, back in '95, achieving a unique treble of victories, winning the World Cross-Country Trial, the Inter-Counties Championship and this National, and I know desperately keen to regain this title. But White, a man who has got more races behind him, more form behind him, if you like. A lot of these men, as we said earlier, will be at the peak of their season. A lot of them just standard club runners, don't have the time or the inclination perhaps to train as hard as the elite. But to run 8.5 miles in these conditions, well, rather them than me, that's all I can say.
I've run this race a few times when I've thought about dropping out, you know. I have to be perfectly honest. But the nice thing is that even when you're back in, I think about 75th is the worst I finished, and you have people around you who are running to beat you, and you've really got to get stuck in. And as I said, it's funny how you still end up sprinting in to pick up those last 2-3 places at the end.
Well, these two coping with that hill. Spencer actually uses a family villa up in the French Alps for altitude training. I know he's back off up there very shortly to prepare for the summer. White will be thinking now, after this race at least, about Turin and his World Cross Country Championships, and of course the Africans that he'll have to face when he gets there. Coming towards the end of this first lap now, but it does definitely look to be down between these two. The gap behind them, back to Royden and Steve Brooks, some 100 metres now.
Well, best bit of running up on this part of the course, but neither of them really testing the other one out at the moment. They're happy to run together for the time being. Both looking fairly comfortable at this stage. There's no visual signs outwardly anyway that either man is in any distress at this point.
Those two look to be well clear, but Barry Royden and Steve Brooks having another little battle in 3rd and 4th place. Huge field, well stretched out around the course, and the crowd's gathering as the second lap gets underway. Plenty to run for all of the field, plenty to watch for the spectators too. We'll be back with the second lap for this 110th English National Cross Country very shortly. Stay with us. See you in a moment. Welcome back. The second lap underway then, and Spencer Duval beginning to show the pressure a little bit maybe there. The head is back a little bit, the grimace slightly more pronounced than it was earlier. And Stephen White in that red kit. And you could throw a handkerchief over the pair of them, couldn't you? White, the speedster, must be a little bit more confident if it comes down to this situation in the last mile. He's received a lot of advice from Dave Moorcroft in the past, a speedster of the 80s.
How big are your handkerchiefs, Tim? A blanket maybe, but Barry Royden battling hard still back with Steve Brooks of Bingley. Brooks with a little bit more of a gliding action. Barry Royden, the strong man. And here's John Downs wearing the strip of Salford. He won't count for them just yet. His eligibility doesn't come through until 1st of April, but he's having a good run, beginning to move through the pack.
One or two faces in that group. Dave Taylor from Blackheath, who looked good early on, beginning to struggle there. Good to see Dave Buzzer in there too for the Cornwall clubman, who's coming back from a couple of years out of the sport with ME. And all these men, of course, placing in the top 20, top 30, trying to get the points for their clubs. The battle up front, the athletes far more concerned, of course, with their individual showing. Certainly I know John Downs, a man who's won the Irish title in the past, will be heading off to the States for 6 weeks training straight after this race. A man who, well into his 30s, is still very, very determined to be, or return to world class as a distance runner.
Downs being joined there by Dave Payne from Tipton, of course one of the most successful clubs in these cross-country championships over the years, producing one or two individual winners, but many times winning the team competition. And great kudos amongst the clubs around the country as to who are the national cross-country champions. And a lot of these men will figure in that battle as points scoring goes all the way back down the field. Barry Royden still working hard here.
And he's had a hard week too, Steve. Barry Royden training for the London Marathon. That's his principal goal. This is just part of his preparations for that. Steve Brooks, well, of course, Bingley have had plenty of winners for this race in the past, but they're running with a team that is missing one or two major stars today. Richard Narurka, of course, isn't running. No Steve Green, one of their stalwarts, he's out injured. So maybe their dominance of the team race under threat. Now, the break has been made. Stephen White beginning to ease away from Spencer Duval, and the strain even more pronounced there on White's features, on Duval's features rather. There, Stephen White still looks good, doesn't he? Very, very powerful in the shoulders, a man who's obviously doing gym work through the winter months, and looking confident too, almost a little smile creeping onto those features.
Well, he looks to be flying along at the moment, picking his way through some of the better ground as he heads down into the muddier section, and maybe beginning to sniff a good victory for himself here. And of course the confidence of knowing that you've produced a gap, that you're going away, you feel strong. There's nobody else at the moment going to threaten, because Spencer Duval is now, as you can see from that shot, a good 60 meters or so behind. There he is. Will still keep ploughing away because he's run a great race, and there's a long way between him and Steve Brooks back in third place. You can see Stephen White disappearing up the hill in the distance, and for Brooks it's a case of just keeping his head down and keep working. Barry Royden behind him. Maybe his chance of finishing in the top three gone here, but you can see that John Downs is beginning to close the gap on Royden, and this could be a real good battle for fourth and fifth place.
Well, here's White well away now, and this one of the better sections underfoot on the course. He'll be quite happy about that. Good to see a new name really on the Winners' Cup, or so we expect by the end of this race. Bernie Ford, Brendan Foster, Dave Lewis, some of the great names of the past. Spencer Duval already has his name on that cup, and Stephen White really, since winning the national junior title a few years back, hasn't really been a major feature on the cross-country scene, Steve. And you often find this, don't you, athletes at the age of 19 through to maybe 22, not dropping out of the sport, but just struggling to find their feet in the senior ranks.
Well, it is always difficult, of course, to make that transition and to make the move. But for him, this, I'm sure, will give him an immense amount of confidence. Good run last week, and topped off this week with excellent run. At the moment, looks as though heading towards a national championship. Coming through the woods, and I wouldn't say you can start to enjoy the victory, because of course there's still a fair way to go, but he's running with good rhythm, looks very, very strong. He just needs to pick his way through, not worry about what's going on behind Spencer Duval. You can see a little bit more leaden in the legs now, not really moving through the conditions like he was before. Barry Royden, ever the strong man, just will keep ploughing on.
Coached by Mike Grattan, of course, former London Marathon winner, is Barry Royden. running strongly there. But this is Stephen White, the man who coaches himself, takes advice from all quarters, and then sifts out what he wants. And what a good job he's making of it.
Stephen White storming down the hill here. Mind the rock, of course. Yes, she's still there, warning him. And he's have all his wits are about him at the moment. Spencer Duval still giving chase. But looks like a lost cause in terms of the lead. But he's well safe in second spot.
And Steve Brooks splashes through that. Spencer, I know he'll be very disappointed, is Steve, without taking the gold. He missed the trial last week specifically to peak for this. He knew he was short of races. You have to come into a race of this caliber with a series of races behind you in the ideal situation to really have peaked for it. Most of these men have got that, and it's a sterling performance from Duval to place amongst the individual medalists. Well, so we expect, if nothing else goes wrong. At least he's got past the rock for the second and final time. And so is this man, most impressively too. And I think this is right for White to have run this. A lot of people will have questioned it with the World Cross Country so soon. But if he feels that he needed this run, then he's probably the best judge of that situation. He knows what he's doing in training, what races he's had in the last few weeks. And this will give him great strength. 2 weeks between this race and the World Cross Country. He can just adjust things slightly in that time, freshen up his legs, get a bit of speed work in. And I think he might spring 1 or 2 surprises in Italy.
Well, I'm always a big believer in when you're running well, go out and race, because the confidence that good performances, either on the cross-country, on the roads or track, it's the confidence that winning gives you. And when you're running well, it's pretty silly sitting at home, as far as I'm concerned. And Stephen White making the right decision to come here today. And I'm sure it will make him perform better in Turin in the World Cross Country.
Steve Brooks, another man with the London Marathon in his sights. John Downs with a half marathon in a couple of weeks' time. I think we'll be pleased with this run. He hasn't had a vintage winter. Plans to go altitude training very soon. And as I said, looking for another good track summer. Regards himself as having a lot of potential at 5,000 and 10,000. But this young man has great potential at the metric mile as well as those longer distances. And what a way to kick off 1997 to lift your first national cross-country title.
It's funny, isn't it, Tim? There's quite a few 5,000, 10,000 men come to these championships hoping to run well, and here's a miler. Marner considers himself to be a track specialist at the short distance, coming here and proving to be a specialist on the country. What a great performance by him.
Well, it is indeed. I'm sure, though, he'll take note of the strength of this performance, the quality of it, really, because he's winning handsomely. Not just winning, but winning by a good distance. And that indicates a very good 5,000 is in the making for this summer. enjoying this finishing straight too is Stephen White. Roared yes at a couple of spectators a couple of 100 metres back. He knows he's got the win in the bag. He had to work very, very hard for it. All credit to Spencer Duval. He's been a particularly tough opponent through the first 6 or 7 miles in this race. It took a long time for Stephen White to break him, but look at that smile. It's a mile wide itself, and he's adding this to that junior title. Comes through the crowds now, smiles all the way. Lovely moment for him, able to really savour this. He becomes the 110th English national cross-country champion, and able to take it easy through the last few metres. Wonderful run from him. Duval some way back, and all that fatigue is forgotten as the elation of the moment is realised. Many athletes have regarded this as the peak of their careers, winning the national cross-country title. Well, White can go on and go upwards from this. Duval, he's been there before, and maybe if he can avoid the injuries, will be back next year. He takes a silver medal, which I'm sure when he sits down and looks at the situation, the way his last year has gone with all the injury problems, he will in fact be very happy with. And Steve Brooks, well, he just ensures that once more the Yorkshiremen get in the frame. He takes the bronze medal for Bingley. Lonely run for Brooks once he'd got clear of Barry Royden, as it was indeed for all men in the top 4. That's the nature of racing at this sort of level. John Downs coming home in 4th place, having caught Royden in the last couple of miles. Disappointed to be outside the medals, I'm sure, but again, all of these performances for the men finishing in the top dozen or so, a stamp of approval, if you like, on their winter's training. The spring and the summer racing beckon. Barry Royden has plans on the 13th of April, which he's a little more concerned about than this one, but he'll be very pleased with that one. 10th in the trial last week, 5th on this occasion in the English National. Dave Payne crosses the line. Tipton, of course, will be very high up in the team race. That result yet to come through. But there it is, confirmation that Stephen White takes his gold for Coventry Godiva. Duval and Brooks for Cannock and Bingley, ensuring that the Midlands and the North get in the frame there. And Tipton Harriers take the team gold ahead of Bingley and Coventry. Anharad Mayer met up with Stephen White after the race. He was very happy.
Stephen White, congratulations. How do you feel?
I'm absolutely delighted, I really am. Yeah, I couldn't be happier. Yeah.
What were the conditions like out there?
They were absolutely horrendous. They were thick deep in mud. As you can see, I'm in the right state, and it was very difficult indeed. A tough course, very tough.
You led more or less all the way round. Is that how you planned it?
Not at all. I just planned to sit in there, see how the race went. I may have been a bit tired from last week, the trials, but I'm getting fitter as days go by. So, just hung in there, really.
Well, it's been a fantastic afternoon of cross-country